Ibu Yuke Sri Rahayu, Direktur Kria, Kuliner, Desain, dan Fashion Kemenparekraf RI atau yang mewakili. Bapak Yuli Yusuf, Wakil Wali Kota Jakarta Utara. Bapak Iwan Wardana, Kepala Dinas Kebudayaan Provinsi DKI Jakarta. His Excellency Armando Alvarez, Duta Besar Meksiko untuk Indonesia. Her Excellency Gina Aljamorali, Duta Besar Filipina untuk Indonesia. Mr. Juan Carlos Rey Salgado, former ambassadors of the European Union. Mr. Diego Santiago Rivera, Sebelum kita beranjak ke acara seminar, baru saja diadakan di tanggal sampai 9 Mei 2023 di Roma, Qatar. Dan boleh kita berikan tepukan kepada tim sumbangan yang ada di hari. So congratulations once again. That we know that ICOM is a very prestigious event. So congratulations again, Ibu Miss Santi. Oke, marilah selanjutnya kita dengarkan kata sambutan dari Mas Agus Sulistyo, Development Director Indonesia di The Heritage 2024, dan kepada Mas Agi, kami silakan.
Terima kasih. Selamat siang semua. Saya akan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia ini. Sebenarnya ini kecelakaan di desa. Kita selalu dorong kerja museum bersama untuk. Pertama saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan, kemudian perwakilan dari Jakarta Utara, dan perwakilan dari Dinas Kebudayaan Provinsi DKI Jakarta, kemudian AMI dan Putra undang satu persatu. Terima kasih. Selamat datang di Museum Bahari, selamat Museum Ria, Seminaria. Jadi ini suatu kehormatan bagi saya dan IAH, sebuah komunitas yang turut serta kemajuan terutama bidang kemuseuman di Indonesia, dan alhamdulillah kita selalu difasilitasi dari Museum Bahari, terutama yang sangat getol sekali tentang rempah-rempah ini harus bergaul di dunia internasional. Jangan hanya tahunya kayu manis saja. Kayu manis ternyata terkenal di tapi yang lain kurang. Mungkin ini menjadi PR kita bersama bahwa ini bangsa, terutama di wilayah Kepulauan Nusantara di masa lalu, dan juga ikut kedatangannya orang Eropa dari Spanyol, Portugis, dan Belanda yang juga membantu ikut mencari rempah ke wilayah Indonesia di masa lalu Indonesia. Jadi saya tidak mau panjang-panjang lagi. Terima kasih atas kehadiran Bapak Ibu semua. Saya ucapkan terima kasih juga dan Bapak Ibu. Saya sebutkan tadi satu-satu, dan teman-teman semua dari komunitas, dari pecinta museum, dari sekolah. Saya ucapkan terima kasih dan selamat datang. Silahkan ekspresi ria dengan Museum Bahari. Kemudian jangan lupa tulis pesan dan kesannya. Tag Indonesia Hidden Heritage dan tag Museum Kebahagiaan Jakarta. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih sekali lagi kepada Mas luar biasa sekali ya. Dan selanjutnya kami besar Meksiko untuk Indonesia, Eksekusi Armando Alvarez, untuk memberikan kata sebutannya mewakili 3 negara yang menjadi narasumber pada seminar siang hari ini. Kepada Eksekusi Armando Alvarez, dan waktu dipersilakan.
Terima kasih banyak. Ibu Besar Director of the Museum Bahari, Mbak Nova Farida Lestari, Director of the Indonesian Heritage Club, Bapak Ari Sulistyo, Indonesian Heritage Club, Bapak Iwan Henry Perdana, Head of the IKA Jakarta Conference Office, Ibu Shinta Ninjawati, Head of Tourism and Creative Economy, North Jakarta, Bapak Jijo Erlambani, Chairman of Asian Museum Association, Jakarta, Bapak Anton Widisoni, representative of the Indonesian Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, representative of Indonesian Bapak Ray Sastian, Jagat Sastra Milen, dear friends, teman-teman. Good afternoon, selamat sore, buenas tardes, magandang hapon. On behalf of my colleagues from the Philippines, Zamorano, and Spain, former Ambassador Juan Carlos Isabel, I am pleased to convey great appreciation to the museum for hosting this seminar on the Manila Galleon and Spice Route. This event is especially significant because it is held in the framework of the commemoration of the 70th anniversary establishment of diplomatic relations between Mexico and Indonesia, and between Mexico and the Philippines, as well as the 65th anniversary of establishment of relations between Spain and Indonesia. However, the first contacts between the peoples of our 4 countries date back 7 centuries, precisely to the establishment of the trade route known as Manila, which for 250 years, quarter of a millennium, united our 3 continents, Asia, the Americas, and Europe, and allowed not only the exchange of goods, but also people, ideas, and culture. That is why the embassies of 3 countries agreed with the museum and Indonesian Hidden Heritage Creative Hub to hold a seminar to discuss the first contacts between our people. This seminar seeks to serve as a platform to exchange knowledge and as a space dialogue regarding shared history between Indonesia, Mexico, the Philippines, and Spain. Discussion Ultimately, it's aimed at promoting mutual understanding, further strengthening the relations between our countries. It's important to mention that the annual celebration of the Galleon has been approved by UNESCO as part of the cultural heritage of the humankind, since it unifies the experience of several peoples, not only in the Pacific, but globally. Mexico is proud of its civilizations whose greatness continue to admire the world. We are also proud of Hispanic, African, Asian heritage. The latter is precisely the product of the Manila Galleon. By the way, the shirt that I am wearing now is known in Mexico as a Guayabera or as a Filipina. May this event be a catalyst for further strengthening the bonds of friendship between our countries. Let us use the power of shared history to deepen the understanding between our four nations. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak. Muchas gracias. Maraming salamat.
Speech, and I really think that this really deepen the bond between the countries. Congratulations, President. So, baik. Selanjutnya adalah kata sambutannya dan akan dibuka di acara seminar ini oleh Ibu Miss Hari selaku Ketua Museum Jakarta. Untuk mewakili Dinas Budaya Provinsi DKI Jakarta. Kepada kami silakan.
Izin Bapak Ibu, Iwan Head, Kepala Dinas kesempatan acara di Provinsi Jakarta bisa mengikuti acara kita. Jadi saya Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. His Excellency Ambassador Mexico to Indonesia, Mr. Your Excellency Ambassador to Indonesia, Mrs. Gina Jamrati. His Excellency former Ambassador to Indonesia, Mr. Juan Carlos Resalgado. Representative of Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Antonio Bisono. Head of Department of Culture, DKI Jakarta Provincial Government, represented by Bapak Bayu Niti Permana. Kepala Suku Dinas Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif, Kota Administrasi Jakarta Utara, Ibu Sinta Ninjawati. The Chairman of Jakarta Museum Association, Paramita Jaya, Bapak Dio Herlambang. Director Eksekutif Indonesia Hidden Heritage Creative Hub, Mbak Nova Fahidalsta. On behalf of Head of Department of Culture DKI Jakarta Provincial Government, I would like to thank and appreciate the collaboration between Indonesia, the Philippines, Mexico, and Spain that hosted by Museum Bahari as a part of the Cultural Department of Jakarta Province. This event is very special because it also connecting Indonesia, the Philippines, Mexico, and Spain through historical related to the voyage and spices trading. It will be more interesting because this museum building was built in 17th centuries as VOC warehouse that keeping, drying, packing of various spices before it's distributed to other countries. I hope through this great occasion would be starting point for cultural advancing collaboration between nations. This event could be a model that museum not only the place to collect or exhibit any artifact, but also can be purpose for the cultural diplomation and the activities of education, creativity, and recreation. In the future, we hope to establish and continue any cooperation regarding the knowledge exchanges, development, and preservation of the culture of each country. I want to express grateful heart to all partners who support this collaboration effort. Finally, I declare the Manila Galleon and the Spice Route Seminar officially open. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mohon izin untuk Ibu Ani tetap berada di sekitar stage, dan sebagai pembukaan acara seminar Manila Galleon dan Jalur Rempah, kami undang ke atas panggung. I welcome you to the stage His Excellency Armando Alvarez, Duta Besar Meksiko, Her Excellency Gina Jamorolin, Duta Besar Filipina, Mr. Juan Carlos Alvarez, former Ambassador of the European Union, Bapak Anton Wibisono dari Kementerian Pendidikan, Kebudayaan, Riset, dan Teknologi Republik Indonesia. Kami undang Bapak Bayu selaku Dinas Kebudayaan DKI Jakarta. Kami undang Ibu Sinta, Kepala Sudin Parekraf Jakarta Utara. Dan kami undang untuk kepada Bapak Iyo T. Herlangga selaku Ketua Amida Paramita Jaya DKI Jakarta. Dan juga kami undang yang terakhir, yaitu Mas Ari selaku Direktur Riset dari Indonesia Tiga Heritage Creative Hub. Baik, untuk memulai pembukaan acara seminar Manila Galleon dan Jalur Rempah, ini adalah merupakan rebana yang, dan hari ini tamu yang terhormat dan narasumber serta undangan yang berbahagia akan menggabung rebana dan merupakan pembukaan dari acara seminar Manila Galleon dan Jalur Rempah. Baik, mungkin ketika saya bilang 1, 2, 3 dengan ini pembukaan, boleh langsung ditabuh dengan semangat dan kencang. Ya. Baik, dengan ini dibuka seminar Manila Galleon dan Jalur Rempah. Ibu, Bapak yang terhormat, kami persilahkan untuk kembali ke tempat duduk. Dan untuk teman-teman tim untuk dapat dibantu untuk rebana ini. Baik, mohon izin, mohon maaf, mungkin untuk narasumber dan juga tamu yang terhormat untuk dapat berfoto bersama terlebih dahulu di depan stage. Mohon izin, Ibu, untuk foto terlebih dahulu. Bapak mohon izin. Baik, dari tim dokumentasi untuk dapat mengabadikan momen yang sangat bersejarah ini. And I welcome the pairs to the documentation this a very amazing moment. Baik, boleh untuk tangannya di dada untuk museum di hatiku. Museum in my heart, Mister. Ya. Salam museum. Salam museum, museum di hatiku. Salam museum, museum di hatiku. Okay, congratulations once again and thank you so much. And it's very amazing. Baik, kami persilahkan untuk kembali untuk ke tempat duduk. Baik, sangat luar biasa sekali untuk acara pembukaan dan opening ceremony dan seminar pada hari ini. Baik, tanpa menunda-nunda lagi, langsung saja kita ke acara selanjutnya, yaitu adalah talk show dari Manila Galleon from the Spice pada siang hari ini. Galleon-Manila atau Galleon-Manila Acapulco atau Spanyol adalah Galleons de Manila Acapulco adalah kapal dagang Spanyol yang setahun sekali atau setahun 2 kali berlayar menyeberangi Samudra Pasifik antara Manila, Filipina, dan Acapulco atau Spanyol baru yang sekarang adalah Meksiko. Kapal galon Spanyol ini berpangkalan di Manila sehingga disebut Galleon-Manila. Rute Manila Spanyol baru dimulai pada tahun 1565 setelah rute perdagangan samudra ditemukan oleh Andres de Urdaneta dan terus berlanjut hingga tahun 1815. Galleon membawa rempah-rempah, porselen, gading, parang pernis, dan kain sutra yang dibeli dari kepulauan rempah-rempah atau Maluku dan Asia Pasifik untuk dijual di pasaran Eropa. Dan pada hari ini, seminar ini akan hadir pada narasumber kita yang sangat luar biasa yang dibantu oleh moderator kita yang sudah tidak asing lagi, yaitu Mbak Rempah Manila Lestari Wazir, Direktur Eksekutif Indonesia Hidden Heritage Creative House. Dan para narasumber yang telah hadir pada siang hari ini adalah His Excellency Armando Alvarez, Duta Besar Meksiko untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Gina Jalur, Duta Besar Filipina untuk Indonesia, Mr. Juan Carlos Rey Salgado, former Ambassadors of the European Union, mewakili Kedutaan Spanyol untuk Indonesia, dan juga Bapak Anton Widisono dari Kementerian Pendidikan, Kebudayaan, Riset, dan Teknologi Republik Indonesia. Kami persilahkan untuk para narasumber dan moderator untuk bisa hadir ke atas panggung. I welcome you, all the guests, to the stage. Once again, I welcome you to His Excellency Armando Alvarez, Her Excellency Gina Jalur, Mr. Juan Carlos Rey Salgado, dan Bapak Anton Widisono ke atas panggung. Dan selanjutnya kami persilahkan kepada Mbak Rempah untuk dapat memulai seminar pada hari ini. Sekali lagi, give a round of applause for the seminar today. Baik, kepada Mbak Rempah, kami silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang teman-teman semua, siang menjelang sore. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, speakers, honorable speakers here. Terima kasih Mbak yang cantik, Mbak Karina, sudah memperkenalkan tentang seminar dan juga para narasumber. Acara seminar hari ini akan berlangsung dalam bahasa Inggris, tapi kalau nanti teman-teman ada pertanyaan, silakan boleh memakai bahasa Indonesia, saya akan menerjemahkan dalam bahasa Inggris, so feel free ya teman-teman. Atau kalau mau langsung dalam bahasa Inggris juga boleh. Okay, I feel very honored to be here. Hello, Mas Anton, Mas Anton, okay. Halo Mas Anton, apa kabar Mas Anton? Baik, His Excellency Armando, it's been a few time for us to meet. Feel honored to have you here as one of the speakers. Her Excellency Gina Jalur, welcome to Jakarta, welcome to Indonesia. It's been a pleasure to have you here also among the speakers. How are you today? Very good, a bit hot. Okay, and Mr. Juan Carlos Rey Salgado, it's the first time for us to meet, but you're very friendly person. We've been talking before, and it's been an honor also to have you here and sharing about the historical Manila Galleon route, which Spain is one of the key actors on this route. So we're going to discuss now, and we're going to have a presentation first from Mr. Juan Carlos Rey Salgado. Please, yeah. Boleh dipasangnya. Thank you.
It's okay now? It's okay. Ambassador of Mexico. And distinguished guests, Mr. Isola also. And also I would like to thank the museum to organize this event. What is about one of the most, I would say, important rain that it was never the Galleon de Manila between Philippines, Mexico, and then following to the third continent. It was 250 years of uninterrupted relationship between three continents that today we know like mondialization. One part of Indonesia, it was playing a fantastic, incredible game in this context. I am talking about the Sulawesi and Moluccas. Never in the history, human history, it was an interest of few European countries rising a huge interest for this part of the world. Why? Two small things: nutmeg and growth. It was rising the interest first of Portugal, then Spain, and third Netherlands, in order to get with a lot of history between these three countries about to obtain the monopoly of trade of this kind of office. Indonesia, Moluccas in Indonesia, Sulawesi, a fantastic page of the right, fantastic page of history. Never in the history of humanity was so big interest for these five small islands. Important. Banda. The Portuguese were the first arriving in 1512, and it was established by the permanent way in 1522 with the construction of one fort or San Juan Bautista. The name of this campaign is Castel. It's better now? Now it's okay. Yes. 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 Okay. Well, check. Ahora, now? Yeah. I say that the Portuguese started the first fort in Ternate, called San Juan Bautista. Today is the city of Castella. Then, in 1521, it was the famous Grand Creek of Magallanes and Elcano arrived in the 1521, establishing the Spanish in Tidore. It was an alliance between the Spanish and the Sultan of Tidore, and the Portuguese were the allies of the Sultan of Ternate. Of course, with this situation, because it was I would say, fight in order to maintain the monopoly of the spices. In 1606, the Spanish was coming from Manila. It was made the conquest of the whole archipelago of the Moluccas as well as Sulawesi. It was two countries in this time, Portugal and Spain. But in 1580, it was the union of the two crowns, Spain and Portugal, under only one king, Philip II. Portugal was always claiming that the Moluccas was property of Portugal. But in 1606, a big fleet coming from Manila to rise the Portuguese position and take control of all Moluccas and Sulapas. The agreement was very difficult because it was two countries and the same king, Philip II. And it was necessary to have one agreement between the two countries to say, okay, you will lose something and you will gain something. For the Portuguese, it was the control of the spices, the trade. And for the Spain, the control, military control and military control and sovereignty of Moluccas. This is an agreement, I can say that it's an agreement, but it was released. In fact, some years in 67 arrived the Dutch. So much more complicated. Portuguese, Spanish, and the Dutch who obtained to keep the property of spices. Spain had the wall of and it was a big fighting between Spanish and the Netherlands was trying to attack Manila. He was trying to attack Manila for many years. In fact, during 48 years, every year was an attack on Manila. And of course, the question was very complicated. The Dutch was more or less controlling 90% of the spices in Moluccas Island, the globe, and the Portuguese and Spanish more or less the 10%. The Netherlands was much more competitive. The organization was better, and it was able to maintain this monopoly. Several countries, for example, Mexico, have a big support in this situation. For example, in 1636, Mexico sent something like 600 soldiers with 200 papalos in order to maintain castles in Moluccas. It was a lot of money. More or less, from the budget of Spanish Filipinas at this time, Moluccas and Florida got something like 30 in terms of money, in terms of capacity, military capacity. This situation was very hard for Spain because it was a lot of money sent to Internet. And the profit was more or less nothing because all the flow was sent to Lisbon by the Portuguese. What is the situation? The situation was clear. It's clear. We need to maintain Moluccas not for the profit of the spices, but in order to maintain the Dutch, avoiding to go to Manila, like we say, like boundary in this part of the world. In fact, Spain was trying to maintain a geopolitical approach, defending Filipinas, maintaining a lot of soldier capacities in Moluccas. With the Westphalia, this was the peace between Netherlands and Spain, and the aggression, I would say, the Netherlands in order to attack Manila Filipinas happened. For this reason, in 1663, it was a decision to leave Moluccas and send everyone to Manila. It was all the military, all the population was sent to Manila. At the same time, around 200 families from Ternate, it was following the troops going to Manila, and today there is a village in Cavite, near to Cavite, that the name is Ternate, and they still in Ternate. In any case, something interesting also is the spices. Everyone is thinking that Anita also it was made for the spices. This is not the case. The historian Antonio de Paula is an scholar. Exhaustive list of products. Spain, Mexico, from Filipinas, and the spice was very, very little composition of this the Galleon. In fact, 90% of the growth was managed by the Dutch, 10 to 20% by the Spanish and Portuguese, and most was sent by the capital of the Indies by the Portuguese Galleon through the Atlantic to Spain was getting practically nothing. The transportation of the transportation was very expensive. With silks and manufacturing. Manufacturing coming from China to Filipinas to Mexico, to Spain. I think it's important to note that interesting is the pressure against the Netherlands in Moluccas. Avoiding that the Netherlands was established in Filipinas. I think this situation was in the never the Galleon. Why? Because one of the objectives of the Netherlands was to cut the Galleon trade between Filipinas. Well, I think this is a question that means to realize that Indonesia has a page, historical page in this part. In Moluccas, I had the opportunity to write the book. In the book is over there. You want to check. And also the question. I was very involved with this part of Indonesia, and I made also a documentary about the spices for Spanish television. Near 1 hour. I would like also to see the opportunity if we can obtain the permission for distribution of this documentary from the Indonesian television. Okay, I would like to here, rising again, historical page of the history of
Thank you, Mr. Juan Carlos, for your insightful sharing. I believe that our audience will have a question, but please keep your questions until the last session. We will open the question and answer sessions later on. And we will move to Her Excellency Gina Azamurali to present the ceremonies from Philippine Embassy. Thank you.
Before I start my presentation, I would like to greet His Excellency Ambassador Albert of Mexico, His Excellency Ambassador Juan Carlos, also a colleague from the Spanish Embassy, Mr. Iwan Henry Wardana, Head of the Jakarta Consular Office, Mr. Anton Bibisono, Technical Expert from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Ms. Mofa Farida Lestari, Executive Director of the Indonesian Indian Heritage Program. Officials of the Maritime Museum of Jakarta, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, salamat siang, buenas tardes, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. It is a pleasure to be here today with all of you. Allow me first to thank the organizers of today's activity, the Indonesian Hidden Heritage Creative Hub, in collaboration with the Spanish and Mexican embassies and the Museum Kebaharian Jakarta. Thank you so much, Terima kasih, for inviting the Philippine Embassy to be part of this important event. Ladies and gentlemen, the Manila Galleons sailed the vast oceans of the Pacific for 250 years, from 1565 to 1815, and yet to this day, 458 years since it began, historians, experts, and institutions still look back and marvel at its legacy. Once upon a time, the continents of Asia, Europe, and the Americas were linked together by caravan ships and transfer of wealth, an early precursor to today's globalized world. The Manila Acapulco Galleon put the Philippines in the spotlight of transoceanic navigation and international trade. Manila during that time became one of the world's great ports, with the Philippines serving as focal point of commerce for Europe and Asia. The West was expanding its horizon into the new worlds, and Spain was a leading power in the discovery of new lands for its monarchy, in competition with Portugal and later with other countries like France, Great Britain, and the Netherlands as well. I also would like to inform you that in Manila, in our National Museum, we have also the Manila Galleon exhibit, where you can find the remnants of the old galleon. Of course, I think one of these galleons, ancient ones, were discovered in the deeps. One of these galleons sunk near the Philippine territory, and I think we have one of those exhibited in Manila, including the whatever was saved from that expedition. I would invite you to visit also that Manila Galleon exhibit in Manila. Now for my start of my presentation. Next slide, please. So the Western Europe was fascinated with the culture of the East, motivated the race for discovering new lands for honor, religion, conquest, and mercantilism. In that age of discovery, Spanish, Portuguese, and Dutch traders wanted to secure exclusive access to the East Indies. The Philippines was part of the Spanish East Indies in the same way that Indonesia was part of the Dutch East Indies and Malaysia was of the British East Indies. Next slide, please. But what made the Philippines so special is its strategic location. It became the hub of early globalization in the early 16th century. We may say that this is the age of discovery of the importance of the Pacific Ocean as the important channel of trade and commerce. Asian products traded at the time were exotic items of interest. In those days, particularly the Chinese silk and porcelain. Also, the galleons were also loaded with precious stones, cotton from India, tea, indigo, spice from the Moluccas or Indonesia, then lacquer and wood from Japan as well, which commanded high prices paid by the New World silver for the rising middle class in Europe who can afford the luxuries. Next slide. The galleons were the largest transoceanic vessels of its era, and Manila was its home port in Asia. Portugal and Netherlands were Spain's rivals, and they controlled the sea routes to Europe. via the Cape of Good Hope. Because of the huge commercial impact and wealth that Galleon ships bring, moving silver as a currency of choice at the time, the most importantly because of the shorter distance of travel between Manila and Mexico. You can see the route eastward, the east of the Philippines go first to the Philippines to Mexico, where the Acapulco and then to Spain. So that was the route at the time, which they called the Tornaviaje. The east was effectively linked with the west. Next slide. With an abundance of skilled workforce, a good harbor, vast supplies of prime quality hardwood and other materials from the Philippines, it is no wonder that majority of the galleons were built in the shipyards of the Philippines, and one of these is in Cavite, as what the ambassador said, it's in Ternate. That city is still there, the same name. So actually, shipbuilding is one of the oldest industry in the Philippines. Manila became the center of trade and important staging point for Spanish colonial expansion in Asia. Next slide, please. The Manila Galleon put Filipinos on the map literally as it paved the way for intercontinental migration of Philippine culture to the Americas in Spain, which is Mexico, shaping identities in other nations. So the Manila Galleon really was a precursor of globalization. It put for 250 years, it brings connectivity in this part of the world. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so it was the Filipinos aboard the galleons, whether as crew, passenger, trader, or sometimes even as slaves or prisoners, found their way to the countries along the vessel's route, such as in Morro Bay in California, in 1587, in various coastal provinces in Mexico. It is for this reason that the Filipinos who were passengers or working as seafarers in their these galleons were able to establish settlements along the route. One of these notably first Asian American settlement is in the marshlands of St. Malo in Louisiana in the late 1763, together with enslaved people and other persons of color, often called as Indios Chinos in Mexico, or sometimes referred to as Indios Luzones. Luzon is one of the islands in the Philippines. And later
it's really important that everybody knows that Filipinos have been here a very long time, that we have contributed to the fabric of America.
Thank you. That is also the product of the Manila Galleon. They were brought to the United States via the Manila Galleon. Now, I will also discuss the Filipino cultural influence in Mexico. I cannot avoid to discuss this because Mexico and Filipinos really have shared a very common heritage. We were also under Spain, both countries. So Filipino culture also spread in Mexico as a direct consequence of the Manila Galleon. In Jalisco, Mexico, in the town of Barra de Navidad, for example, there is a commemoration of the Philippine heritage celebrated by the local community. Farther down the coastline of Mexico, in the town of Colima, they have a traditional drink called tuba, made from the sap of coconut trees, to which they add other seasonal fruits and nuts and serve food as a refreshment. In the Philippines, the same coconut sap is celebrated drink in the rural areas for social gathering and as a refreshing beverage. This is yet another evidence of cultural assimilation resulting from when Filipinos from the Galleon ships established roots elsewhere and started a tradition that to this day still endures.
Vamos con información de Colima. Usted conoce la tuba. Es una bebida refrescante que se extrae de las palmeras. Vamos a ver justamente cómo se comercializa esta bebida.
De herencia filipina, pero de identidad completamente colimense, la tuba es una bebida refrescante, extraída del corazón de las palmeras y considerada el brebaje fermentado más antiguo del país. Es usual encontrarla a la venta en el centro de la ciudad capital, como opción refrescante para los días calurosos, pero también por las mañanas, recién bajada de la palma y acompañada de virote. Y es justo aquí, en la avenida Constitución, una de las más transitadas de Colima, donde se localiza el camellón de la tuba, lugar de trabajo y venta de la organización más grande de productores de tuba. Durante 31 años, Carlos ha escalado palmas de gran altura para extraer este valioso néctar. Ni la muerte de su padre, producto de una caída realizando esta labor, lo llevó a cambiar de oficio. Ahora, su hijo Carlos, de 15 años, ya sigue la tradición familiar y así como él, más niños y jóvenes se forman como tuberos. ¿Ya te a las palmas? No te da miedo. La tuba puede ser natural o compuesta con otras frutas, contando cacahuates para equilibrar su dulzor y aportar textura. Es un antídoto para el calor, con propiedades benéficas para el organismo y una tradición centenaria que se protege. Desde Colima, para Mil Noticias, Arnoldo Delgadillo.
Thank you very much. I'm familiar with the drink because in my province in the Philippines, we also used to gather that for really a local drink, and it's very strong. It's like, for me, it's like, we also call it lambanon in Filipino, or it's like vodka, or sometimes if you drink it becomes brandy. So depends on how you, but it's a very strong drink. But of course, the story is not complete without Spain. Spain also contributed a lot to the Philippines in terms of cultural and especially on the food. The paella from Spain, a dish combining chicken with mixed seafood and rice, for example, has also become popular in Philippine homes, especially during special celebration or fiestas. The Philippines' most famous dish, the adobo, which is meat or poultry stewed in vinegar with soy sauce, most likely bought from the Spanish adobado, which is also a dish made with vinegar. The vinegar is really part of the preservative during the Manila Galleon because it protects the shelf life of the food during these long voyages. So this vinegar became something in common in this part of the region. Soy sauce, for its part, is an Asian condiment most notably used in China, Japan, and Korea, and its use in Philippine adobo can be attributed to the family of Chinese merchants trading all kinds of goods with the Philippines. We also have a heavy Chinese presence in the Philippines, undoubtedly influenced the Filipino palate, and soon after, soy sauce has been the most common go-to partner of vinegar when cooking local Philippine adobo. Next slide, please. The local Philippine adobo has several variants, one of them being squid adobo, adobong pusit, with its black sauce due to the squid ink, the black ink of the squid being mixed with the dish. It's my favorite dish, by the way. In Spain, while there were a lot of squid and seafood available, using squid ink in cooking was said to be brought over to Spain by Jesuit missionaries who had been in the Philippines. In the present-day Basque region of Spain, there are many dishes cooked using squid ink. Pasta negra, calamari, esopinta, etc., which could have been influenced by the same Jesuit missionaries. 250 years of the world's longest running shipping enterprise will definitely make an impact in the countries that were part of the Manila-Acapulco Galleon trade along with their people. These mighty ships of yesteryears transported goods, wealth, ideas, culture, beliefs, and innovation, which until this time still endures. With this, I would like to congratulate the organizer of this museum, continue to relive this legacy of the Manila-Acapulco Galleon. Thank you very much. Thank
you, Our Excellency Gina Jamorolin. It's always heartwarming, isn't it, when we understand that we have a certain culture and certain heritage, and it makes us closer than we think because we have similarity, although we are apart by the distance, but we actually close and having a culture setting between countries. Okay, so on the next speaker, we have His Excellency Armando G. Alvarez to have a presentation.
You heard this story first from the Spanish point of view. Then you heard this story from the Filipino point of view. Now you will hear this story from the Mexican point of view. And finally, I hope we will hear the same story from the Indonesian point of view. And you will see how, in the end, although different visions, the story converges into one. I prepared one presentation for this event. Kindly put it on the screen, okay. Full screen, please. Okay, I call this presentation the Manila Acapulco Galleon and the First Globalization. Next, please. Okay, as I said before, this year Mexico celebrates the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations with Indonesia and the Philippines, and the 187th anniversary of diplomatic relations with Spain. At the same time, we already said, Spain is celebrating the 65th anniversary of diplomatic relations with Indonesia. Okay. In the case of Spain, well, the relationship of the people of Mexico and the peoples of the three countries goes back several centuries back. In the case of Spain, to 1519. That year, the first Spanish ship arrived in what it is now the port of Veracruz in Mexico's Atlantic coast. In the case of the Philippines and Indonesia, the first contact, as Ambassador Giancarlo already mentioned, they date back to the establishment of the trade route known as the Manila-Acapulco Galleon which linked Spain, Mexico, the Philippines, and the Maluku Islands from 1565. Next, please. Okay. In the 15th century, the Castilian crown, at that time, you remember there were two big crowns in Spain, Castilian crown and the Aragon crown, the so-called Catholic kings, Fernando and Isabel. Well, they decided to finance the voyage of an Italian guy, Christopher Columbus, to Asia. They wanted to go to Asia. They didn't know America existed. They wanted to come here. They wanted to come to the Spice Islands. They wanted to cross the Atlantic Ocean and reach Asia, because the Portuguese already had done that, sailing around Africa and India. Okay, they simply did not expect to find a new continent in the middle, a continent that today we call America, or the American continent. Their real goal was to arrive to the rich lands of Cathay, now China, and to the Spice Islands, now Maluku Islands, where the most precious spices in the European markets came from. Columbus passed away. He died still thinking that he had arrived to a place near the East Indies. He never realized he had discovered a new continent. Actually, he didn't discover the continent, because there were millions of people living in that continent, so the continent was not empty, it was inadequate. Anyway, he died without knowing that he had arrived to a new continent, and that is why the continent doesn't have his name. The continent is not called Colombia, it's called America, because another guy, Amerigo Vespuccio, made the first map of the continent and gave the name to the continent. But this is why, since he thought he had arrived to the East Indies, but he called the Aboriginal people of the Americas Indians, and still the word is used for Mexican Aboriginal people to call them Indians, when they are really not Indians. They are maybe indigenous or Aborigines, but not Indians, because that was an historical mistake. Next, please. Okay, for ancient Mexicans, the arrival of the Europeans in the early 16th century was a real shock, a cultural and civilizational shock. The ancient Mesoamerican civilization, you can see some remains of that civilization in the pyramids of Teotihuacan near Mexico City. Maybe you can see some little dots in the top of the pyramid. Those are people, so that you have an idea of the size of the pyramid. On top of the main pyramid, you can see some small dots. Those are people, just for you to have an idea of the size of the pyramid. Okay, the ancient Mesoamerican civilizations disappeared to give place to a new world dominated by the language and the religion of the conquerors, as well as by an intense ethnic and cultural mixture between Aborigines, Europeans, and Africans. Later on, Asia will come to America, as Ambassador Gina already said. A new multi-ethnic and multicultural country began to take shape in a process that lasted for 3 centuries. Next, please. In the case of Mexico, the colonial era goes from 1521 to 1821, exactly 300 years. 1521 is when Mexico Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, fell in the power of Hernan Cortés, and 1821 is when finally the insurgent army finished the independence war and declared the independence of Mexico. Exactly 3 centuries. During 3 centuries, Mexico was called the viceroyalty of the New Spain. It was a period of a deep ethnic and cultural mixture. Mining and agriculture, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, mining and agriculture were the main economic activities. The Spanish language and the Catholic religion became dominant all over the country. Arts and literature flourished. You can see there a lady, a nun, her name was Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and he was recognized as one of the most important writers of her time, despite the fact that at that time women were not allowed into universities, only men. And despite that fact, he was at the level of the most important Spanish-speaking authors in the whole world. rich European style cities proliferated. That's a depiction of Mexico City. It's still like it is today. Mexico City was then called the City of Palaces, and this was the gestation period of the Mexican nation. Next, please. Okay, despite the finding of a new continent, despite that the Spanish people had an entire new continent to colonize, they never stopped dreaming on reaching Asia. They insisted on coming here, coming to Asia. So in 1563, Admiral Miguel López de Legazpi departed from Mexico's Pacific coast with a fleet of sailors, mostly, of course, the captains were Spanish people, but the fighters were indigenous people, were Tlaxcalan indigenous fighters, and 3 months later, they arrived to the island of Cebu in the Philippines. Later, they attacked the island of Luzon and fundated Manila Intramuros, which would be the capital of the Philippines, a marvelous Spanish city within Manila metropolitan area. A big number of Tlaxcalan indigenous people settled down in Manila and were absorbed in the local population. Still, several Naoa language or Aztec language words such as atoli, camote, tamali, yanquistli, alpazote, caguate, calua, cassava, sili, jicama, yabas, piña, papaya, among many others, are part of the Tagalog language. Next, please. Okay, that was the route. The maritime route from New Spain, Mexico, to Asia was finally inaugurated in 1565 by Andrés de Urdaneta, after discovering the route back to the New Spain thanks to the Kuroshio current. You can see that the route from Mexico to the Philippines is one, and the return route is another one, different one. Why? Because of the winds and the currents. The journey from Acapulco to the Philippines used to take about 3 months. The return trip between Manila and Acapulco would last between 4 and 5 months due to the detour that the galleons made to the north in order to follow the mentioned Kuroshio current. Next, please. Okay, the galleons transported not only objects and merchandises, but also ideas, tastes, religious precepts, vocabulary, architectural and artistic concepts, stylistic foundations, gastronomic customs, and cultural elements that marked forever the life and customs of Spain, the Philippines, the Maluku, and Mexico. The vehicle of communication was the Spanish language. Still, in the Filipino provinces of Zamboanga, Basilan, Cavite, Cotabato, Davao, and Tawi-Tawi, a language, Spanish-based language called Chabacano is spoken by nearly 1.2 million people, and also some of them live in Sabah in Malaysia. Similarly, in Tidore and Ternate in the Maluku Island, they speak the Ternateño, you say, Ambassador Lee? Ternateño is the language. They speak Ternateño, a sister language with the Chabacano, also based in the Spanish language. Next, please. Okay, after the Spanish conquest of Mexico, the Manila Acapulco galleon changed forever the life and culture of the country. But Mexico also sent to Asia people, techniques, products, and beliefs that still subsist in many Asian countries. Let's see the story. Next, please. In Manila, Asian products from the Maluku, Java, China, Japan, Formosa, Siam, and India were shipped to Acapulco. Products such as silk, tea, toys, screens, and Japanese lacquers, porcelain, jade, ivory, furniture, spices like clove, cinnamon, pepper, textiles from the provinces of Ilocos in the Philippines. Subsequently, those merchandises were carried by land from the port of Acapulco in the Pacific coast, Mexico Pacific coast, to the port of Veracruz in Mexico Atlantic coast. And then they were loaded on the ships of the fleet and sent finally to Seville and Cadiz in Spain. Next, please. There was a market, a famous market in Posita still exists in Argentina, the Parian, or not? Still? Okay. In Manila, yes. In Manila, there is a very famous market called El Parian. Well, similarly, in Mexico City main square, you can see the depiction of the at the time, market was softened and was called precisely El Parian, just like the one in Manila. It was a two-story square and several premises built with stone. While the voyages of the Manila Galleon lasted 250 years, it was a place reserved for luxury and wealth. It also worked as a showcase that dazzled the capital society with strange products that came from Asia that they had never seen before. Next, please. But Mexico received not only goods from Asia, also received people. A recent study shows that the inhabitants of the Mexican Pacific coast have an important genetic component from Southeast Asia, particularly from the Philippines and Sumatra. Historical records estimate that between 40,000 and 120,000 immigrants from Southeast Asia arrived in colonial Mexico, many of them forcibly. That left a permanent mark on diverse aspects of Asian culture in Mexico, as another thing already mentioned. Screens, another example, one example of this Asian influence in Mexico were the screens. They are of Chinese origin, but more used in Japan. They inspired the American. They say American, I mean people speak for that American continent, not from the USA. The USA didn't exist yet. The English hadn't arrived to America yet. So we're speaking basically of Hispanic American, not the Anglo-American. They inspired the American artists, becoming the natural and most widespread support of the new spectacle painting. The influences even reached a generous use of gold leaf in imitation of the paintings on the screen of the Momoyama period in Japan. Next, please. Also, ceramics. Another example is the famous ceramics produced in Puebla known as Talavera Poblana. Although the word Talavera refers to a city near Toledo, Talavera de la Reina, right? Talavera de la Reina. In Mexico, it adopted orientalizing motifs, white and blue, oriental design, landscape, Chinese children with parasols, and eminently Chinese forms such as double pumpkins and broad-shouldered vessels. That piece of Talavera that you see there is not from China. It was made in Mexico. What was made in colonial Mexico, of course, you can see the clear Asian influence on it. Next, please. The same happened with lacquer. Lacquer furniture, Asian-inspired furniture proliferated in Mexico, especially with an American resin similar to the Chinese or Japanese lacquer that they call brass, and with designs and style evidently inspired Asian products. You can see clearly the Asian influence in those pieces of furniture made in Mexico, in particular in the state of Michoacan. Next, please. Well, Ambassador Gina already mentioned this, the story of the tuba, that was brought by the Filipinos to Mexico, and somehow it was the precedent of what would be later the production of mezcal and the famous Mexican tequila. The distillation is the grandmother of the mezcal and the Mexican tequila. Next, please. But of course, spices is what they were looking for when they came here and when they went to Maluku. We have a very famous Mexican dish called mole poblano that comes with clove, cinnamon, and some other spices that wouldn't be possible to prepare without the spices came from Maluku Islands to Mexico. Pepper, ginger, nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon became indispensable ingredients of recipe books in Mexico, but also grated coconut or coconut milk. Fruits such as tamarind and mango, which also arrived with the Galleon, took root in the warm, humid areas of the Mexican Pacific. Ceviche, called kinilao in the Philippines, became one of the most popular coastal dishes to this day in Mexico. In some markets of the Mexican state of Colima, tuba vinegar is still sold, which is commonly used in the Philippines, although very little known in Mexico. Next, please. Carey also, before the Spanish arrived and the Galleon sailed back and port across the Pacific, China had long been bartering goods with the Philippines. One of those products was carey, or tortoise shells, which was adopted by Western countries to design boxes or pulpits for the churches, for the Catholic churches. Next, please. Textiles also, of course, we have a lot of textiles from Asia. The world of textile experienced real changes, both in the use of materials and designs and techniques. The typical Mexican rebosos in the far left, up left, with very bright colors and small white dots, are made with a staining technique of Asian origin called ikat. The paliacate, or Mexican handkerchief, that you see to the right, one of the national symbols par excellence of Mexico, actually owes its name to the port of Pulicat in India. Also, the fabric of Cambaya, in the bottom left, originally from India, has been Mexicanized to such an extent that Mexico is a benchmark in the production of this textile today. Next, please. Garments. These people are from Yucatan, Mayan people from the state of Yucatan in south of Mexico. They are using, the men are using a shirt that they call Filipinas. They call Filipinas. Next, please. So Mexico was in the center of this trade, in the middle of Asia, and Spain was in the center. So Mexico received the first Asian influence and irradiated this influence to the rest of American continent, I insist. Mexico City became the intellectual center of information about Asia in the American continent. The city already had a printing press, a university, seminaries, and a large book trade. And it was precisely in Mexico where the most important book on China was written, History of the Most Remarkable Things, Rites, and Customs of the Great Kingdom of China, by Juan González de Mendoza, who obtained the information from those who had been in the Philippines and China. Later, in 1585, this book was published in Rome and translated into all European languages and had more than 40 editions. It was the real bestseller of its time. It can be said that the Manila Galleon turned Mexico City into the first global city. Next, please. Well, how did Mexico pay for all these marvels, all these wonders that received from Asia? With silver. With silver. Mexico produced one third of the world silver at that time. One third of the world silver. And that was the main export from Mexico to Asia. Still, Mexico is today the largest producer of silver worldwide. In 1535, only a few years after the Spanish conquest, the Royal Mint in Mexico City began minting silver pieces known as Real de Ocho, or piece of 8, or peso fuerte. That currency had the greatest use in world trade than any other in history. For centuries, it was used for trade in all the Asian continent. In China, they used to trade with Mexican pesos. Inside China, not internationally. It was for Mexico a capital export item and a good source of tax revenue for centuries. Normally, silver circulated in China by weight. The determination of weight and purity was done by each exchange house. However, the peso fuerte, due to its stability, was highly appreciated and used by Europeans and Chinese traders. In the upper part, you can see the coins that Mexico minted during the colonial period. In the bottom part, you can see the coins minted in independent Mexico. Okay. Next, please. And also, many products came here from Mexico. Mexican plants such as avocado, beans, corn, cocoa, peanuts, tomato, when I say pepper, I mean chili pepper, plums, pumpkin, papaya, vanilla, and a large variety of chili peppers arrived in the Philippines through the Manila Galleon. Also, through the Manila Galleon, other important products from other parts of the American continent came here, such as pineapple, potato, strawberry, tobacco, and many others. Next, please. And of course, also religious influence came from Mexico. In some aspects, the Captaincy General of the Philippines was linked to the Viceroyalty of the New Spain. The members of the religious orders with a presence in the Philippines and other countries in the region were closely linked to the clergy settled in Mexico. Filipinos devoted a strong attachment for Catholic statues, such as the Black Nazarene, the Virgin of Antipolo, and the Santo Niño de Cebu. Our Lady of Guadalupe, the main Mexican icon, she's supposed to be the Mother of Christ, which was supposed to have appeared in Mexico City a few years after the Spanish conquest, was declared heavenly patroness of the Philippines by Pope Pius XI. And Mexican missionaries also expanded Christianity in other countries like Japan and Korea. Felipe de Jesus, for instance, was a Mexican guy who was crucified in Nagasaki, and also they did the same in Korea. Next, please. Well, as a conclusion, we can say that for 1/4 of a millennium, for 250 years, the route of the Manila Galleon constituted a bridge between Europe, America, and Asia. Since the beginning, the route of the Galleon had enormous influence on the economic history of the Philippines, Mexico, Spain, and the Maluku Islands. Mexico was in the middle. Mexico was in the center of the world, as the viceroyalty was placed in a key position between Europe and Asia. The movement of people carrying their languages, their customs, their worldview transformed in a decisive way the reality of all the countries involved. At some point, the Manila Galleon marked the consolidation of the first process of globalization. Without knowing this history, the history of the Manila Galleon, it is not easy to understand much of the world today. Terima kasih banyak.
Amazing, Ambassador. Thank you for sharing this rich historical knowledge. The patience of trading, not only moving the goods, but also moving cultures and ideas across the continents. So we have heard the story of the Spain, we have heard the story of Philippines, Mexico, and we would like to hear the theme from Indonesia about this. Please, Mas Anton, to present your paper.
Well, the previous speaker has given out some tips about this Manila Galleon, and it's a very interesting story about how it. I'm trying to make it so. Well, it was an interesting story about how three countries, the Asia, the America, and the Europe, connected each other to the Manila Acapulco Galleon. So, if you allow me, I will try to tell a story about the spice. First of all, Her Excellency Gina Hamoral, Ambassador of Philippines to Indonesia, His Excellency Armando G. Alvarez, Ambassador of Mexico to Indonesia, Honorable Mr. Juan Carlos Salgado, former Ambassador of the European Union, Honorable Miss Ari, Head Unit for Management of Museum Kebaharian Jakarta, distinguished guests and participants, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Directorate of Cultural Protection, it is an honor for me to be invited to this event to convey what we are doing in the ministry related to the spice food. My name is Anton Wibisono. I am a general heritage expert working in the Directorate of Cultural Protection. My field of work is nominating Indonesia's cultural heritage to become World Heritage or enlisted in ICH UNESCO. My presentation today is titled The Land Below the Wind, Spice Trade Route on 13th until 18th century AD. Next slide, please. Let me begin this presentation with a quote by Ibnu Muhammad Ibrahim. Most of the population below the winds enjoys spring endlessly. As always goes below the wind, the existing centers are not based on any power or sovereignty. Everything is nothing but execution. The natives calculate a person's high rank and wealth based on the number of slaves he owned. The land below the wind is a phrase borrowed from the title of Anthony Reed's book, called Southeast Asia in the Age of Commerce, 1450 until 1680, Volume 1, The Land Below the Wind. Reid quoted this phrase from Ibnu Muhammad Ibrahim's The Ship of Sulaiman, which translated from the Persian by J.O. Ken and published by Routledge and Kegan Paul in 1972. The Land Below the Wind is a nickname given by merchants from Middle East to describe a vast area that is today Southeast Asia. The term the land below the wind is related to the seasonal winds that blows toward this region. Next slide, please. The history of spice is almost as old as human civilization. It is a history of land discovered, empires built and brought down, wars won and lost, treaties signed and flouted, flavors sought and offered, and the rise and fall of different religious practices and beliefs. Spices were among the most valuable items of the trade in ancient and medieval times. As long ago as 3500 BC, the ancient Egyptians were using various spices for flavoring food, in cosmetics, and for embalming their dead. The use of spices spread through the Middle East to the Eastern Mediterranean and Europe. Spices from China, Indonesia, India, and Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, were originally transported overland by donkey or camel caravan. For almost 5,000 years, Arab middlemen controlled the spice trade until European explorers discovered a sea route to India and other spice-producing countries in the East. Various products unique to Indonesia, such as spices, agarwood, camphor, and bird feathers, have long been exchanged from one place to another over great distances. The exchange of goods is also a means of interaction and cultural exchange. Initially among the islanders of Southeast Asia, but then expanded to the Asia-Pacific region and even to Europe. Traders from West Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and Europe came and interacted in a trading networks, which became known as the spice route. The high demand for spices is caused not only by gastronomic needs. The spice was considered to have extraordinary medicinal and preventive properties. Burned as incense in religious rituals and distilled into perfume and cosmetic. Valued as a luxury good by the wealthy, spices were a symbol of wealth and social prominence. Crucial difference between spices and herbs, although both are used frequently in cooking and in medicine. Herbs and spices also provide taste and aroma. Herbs are plants that are used fresh or when they are still green, although sometimes they are dry. There are several kinds of herbs that are used in cooking and medicine, such as parsley, sorrel, or borage. And there are also herbs that are only used in medicine, such as mandrake, digitalis, or rue. While spices are plants that are used in dry or semi-processed form. Until the end of the 13th century AD, when Marco Polo visited India and other parts of South Asia, Europeans were completely unaware of pepper, nutmeg, or cloves in whole or fresh form. Even ginger and its cousins, such as galangal and white turmeric, must have been very dry after a journey that took at least a year to the European continent. These differences between herbs and spices uses the point of view of medieval Europeans. Next slide, please. So we are very familiar with this myth. Spices are used to preserve meat, or they are used to mask the taste of meat that is not fresh. But actually, spices do little to preserve meat than salting, pickling, or drying methods do. The bad taste of rotten meat will not be reduced significantly by spices. There are at least three functions of spices that make them so valuable in the eyes of many people that they are expensive. These three functions often blend into one another, making it difficult to separate them clearly. Those three functions are, next slide please. Spices can be found in almost every medieval European cuisine. In European cookbooks of the 13th until 15th century AD, spices appear in 75% of recipes. According to Taillevent, royal chef of Queen of France in the late 14th century AD and author of the Viandier, the most famous and most widely copied cookbook of his time, a chef's standard ingredient list includes at least 20 different types of spices. Pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and saffron were the most important spices in medieval cuisine, while clove, nutmeg, and mace, which cost far more than the other culinary spices, were highly valued and more prestigious, although they were used less frequently than the former spices. In addition to the main menu, spices are also used as a dessert after dinner, namely in the form of spiced wine and spiced soup. Next slide, please. Another function of spice is in the medicine. Of the many spices imported to Europe from Asia, a small portion is used as medicine or perfume or fragrances. The need for fragrance explains the allure of spices, thus they are considered helpful and associated with healing effects. The multifunctional nature of spices is very important because it is used not only in gastronomy but also as medicine and disease prevention. This is understandable considering that the past life were very vulnerable to outbreaks or pandemics. Spices are believed to have helpful efficacy and increase the body's immunity. In particular, spices help balance fluid that affect health and mood. Next slide. This is another function of spice. Another function of spice is distilled to become perfume or fragrances. Perfumes and incense are used to make the air clean and healthy. It is customary that the rooms in a comfortable home should be not only spacious and well ventilated, but also scented with spice that may be placed in corner of home or room, or the smell of burning insect resin. Spices have a calming effect that creates a feeling of well-being. They can be enjoyed in the form of food or drink, or inhaled as an aromatherapy. Paradise is believed to have a sweet scent, and often the scent is associated with the smell of flowers. But in many texts, such as the Latin poem Vision of Slurville, written in the early 13th century AD, the fragrance of paradise is more specifically associated with the smell of spices. Fragrance is also a symbol of holiness. Fragrance are part of the church's worship rituals until today and are associated with heavenly scent emitted by the Garden of Eden and saints, both living and dead, as a proof of their holiness. Next slide, please. According to the medieval legend, the three magi who visited baby Jesus when he was just born were kings from the east who brought two spices, which is frankincense and myrrh, and gold as a sign of tribute or wealth and worship. This is an example that illustrates how high the value of spices was in the Middle Ages. Next slide, please. According to the belief of medieval Christians in Europe, based on the content of the Bible, four major rivers, namely Gion or Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, and Pison or the Ganga, have their upstream in the Garden of Eden. In addition, they believe that the Garden of Eden was filled with gems, gold, and various plants. These plants then produce spices, and those spices then wash away through these four rivers. So it is a belief in medieval Europe that spices were brought down from the Garden of Eden from these four main rivers in the east. Given that Gion, Tigris, Euphrates, and Pison are in the east, the Garden of Eden is also thought to be in the east. Isidore of Seville, the author of an Encyclopedia of Natural Science in the 2nd century AD, estimated that the Garden of Eden was a province in Asia. This interpretation later became known knowledge for geographers in Europe at that time, who had previously known the position of India, Persia, and Asia Minor. The clue to the search for the Garden of Eden is the closer you are to the Garden of Eden, the more obvious the aroma of the spices will be. Next slide, please. As has been shown by the previous explanation, spices are one component that is important for the Europeans. Common knowledge here in Indonesia places that spices is the main motivation for the arrival of Europeans to the Indonesian archipelago. Well, spices are indeed an important component that fuels European exploration. But various historical events playing in the background also add to its momentum for the first departure of ships from Iberian Peninsula to Asia. There are at least 3 reasons that triggered Europeans to explore the seas to the east. 1. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. During the centuries of crusade, which followed the long shadow of conflict and reconquest between Europe and the Muslim powers until around the 15th century, Constantinople became a hot club alongside with other vital places such as Jerusalem. Interestingly, despite conflict and war, this area has never ceased to be an emporium where exchange of goods and take places between the Western and Eastern world. Therefore, when Sultan Mahmud II from the Ottoman Turks laid siege to Constantinople for 53 days and finally take full control of it in 1453, the city's role in world trade became uncertain. To be clear, trade with Europe was no longer possible. To the European world, which has long depended on commodities from the East, including spices, finally had to rack its brain to keep gaining its rate of interest. So they need to find the new route to the Spice Island because the fall of the Constantinople. The second one is the development of new maritime equipment and supplies under Francis Hendrik, the navigator of Portugal. And then the third one is the high price of spices in the world market made Europeans seek maximum profit from the spice trade. Next slide, please. In 1497, King Manuel of Portugal authorized Vasco da Gama to make a sea voyage to India through the southern tip of Africa in search of spices. The Portuguese have been familiar with the coast of Africa for decades. They have even gone further south and inland to the continent as they developed techniques to deal with wind, currents, and climate. This major expedition at the end of 15th century AD marked the beginning of the European journey and its global outreach, which was motivated by the desire to find the Spice Island. Compared to Vasco da Gama, Christopher Columbus' expedition was small in scale and poorly funded. Columbus essentially sold his grand idea to Spain after being rejected elsewhere, including Portugal. He presented his idea to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain in 1491, and despite many obstacles, he was eventually able to put his idea into action. The idea was to sail the sea westward to India. So His Excellency already told the whole story about how Christopher Columbus, he thinks he found India, but actually he found a new country. Next slide, please. Long before the arrival of Europeans, ports in Indonesia were already busy with merchants from other nations. Local people and immigrants interact and communicate with each other at this location. The dynamics of sexual relation color every aspect of life, from food to religion. It is this openness that makes Indonesian society, especially those living on the coast, a cosmopolitan. This cosmopolitanism became one of the foundations for our founding fathers to form a democratic nation with motto Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or unity in diversity. Next slide. When Europeans were still guessing about the existence of the quote, Garden of Eden as a spice-producing region, Arabs, Indian, and Persian merchants already knew about the land below the wind. This nickname was given to the vast area that is today Southeast Asia. At the time, the lands below the wind had local kingdoms that controlled trade, powerful sea fleet, and vast territories. On one hand, these kingdoms were open to immigrants and merchants wishing to do business in their territory. But on the other hand, these kingdoms competed each other, rise and fall one after another. So, what I present to you here is some of the ancient kingdom in Indonesia. First in Lamuri. Lamuri is in Sumatera. Then we have Majapahit in Java. Aceh Darussalam is continuation of Lamuri. And then we have Moluku Kiraha. Moluku Kira is basically 4 kingdoms, Ternate, Tidore, Bacang, and Jailolo. And we have Watalo and Teluk Pocowe in South Sulawesi. But most Indonesians only know about only know Goa and Talo. Only little people knows about the Teluk Pocowe. Next slide, please. The dynamics of social relation over the century did not always run smoothly. There was a lot of competition between local kingdoms and foreign traders, especially traders from Europe. Many peace agreements have been signed by both parties. However, it is not uncommon for war to occur between the two. European traders attempt to monopolize the spice trade. Meanwhile, local kingdoms in the archipelago wanted to maintain their sovereignty in trade. Next slide. Those formidable empires and kingdoms are now long gone, except for a few of their descendants. Ports that were once bustling are now deserted and forgotten. Only toponyms and few buildings remain. They became silent witness of the hectic trade of the past and the glory of the empire and kingdom in the archipelago. Cultural properties that survive must now struggle to face the changing time and the rapid development. So, ladies and gentlemen, this silent witness of the past, one of them is now the Museum Kabarian Jakarta, which today is pending, and they are struggle with the change and development, especially in Jakarta. Next slide. In contrast to the condition of cultural property, intangible cultural heritage, which bears evidence of interaction between cultures in the past, have survived to this day. However, the fast current of modernization is also a threat with its sustainability. So, from the story of His Excellency and Her Excellency, we all know that the intangible cultural heritage can be still found today, both in Filipina and Mexico, and also in Indonesia. These are the witness that we can interact with each other long time ago. And through this spice route, I hope we can reconnect the connection between countries, not to commemorate about the colonization of or the war, but how we communicate with each other. Next slide. So this is an overview. Spices are a metaphor for the world atmosphere offered in human interaction. This I borrow from the Professor Susanto Zudi, a lecturer in University of Indonesia. Root is a geographical space or island that accommodates intercultural interaction, as indicated by the connection between certain points that form a network, eventually forming a corridor. The interaction between nations in the spice route is not only between ethnic groups, and early political units within the archipelago, but also within humans and other nations from outside the Indonesian archipelago, be it Southeast Asia and the rest of the world. I would like to conclude my presentation with a quote from Some Ture. So, Malay traders say that God created Timor for sandalwood and Banda for woolly and Maluku for clothes. And this merchandise are not found anywhere else in the world, but in those places. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mas Anton, for sharing the story how spices have become a driver for another countries to come to the Asia. Okay, now we already have all the presentations and we would like to open the questions and answer sessions. Kita akan buka sesi tanya jawab. Teman-teman yang mau bertanya, saya akan memberikan 3 pertanyaan untuk teman-teman yang ada di sini. Boleh menggunakan bahasa Indonesia, nanti I will translate to English later on. And also untuk teman-teman yang di online, panitia boleh nanti dicatat pertanyaan teman-teman yang dari Zoom atau dari YouTube. Nanti kita akan bantu jawab di sini. Oke, now I will open the first sessions. Ada yang akan bertanya? Boleh? 1, 2, 3. Boleh teman panitia dibantu dulu? Ada 1, 2, 3 di tengah? Boleh teman-teman panitia dibantu dulu? Boleh dibantu dulu untuk mic-nya? We're not only studying culture, but also studying. Okay, boleh dibantu sebelah sini.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to thank first all the speakers for their wonderful insight and sharing of knowledge for this afternoon. My question actually is for Ambassador Juan Carlos. Based on all the presentations of the speakers, it seems like for 250 years, we had a great thing going. So I just would like to get your insights. Who made it stop? Why for 250 years we had a great thing both for trade and exchange of wealth. So why did you think the Galleon trade stopped? Thank you very much.
Okay, we can directly answer as actually my curiosity as well. Why does it stop?
I think the intervention of the speakers are able to give a global vision of the Galleon. The question of the Galleon is not the Galleon itself, it's what is behind it. Who is involved? What people are there? For example, some people from Moluccas, people settled in Mexico. Some people from Moluccas is settling in the Philippines. And then from Mexico, go to Spain. I think we need to see this in a global way. Today we are talking about global globalization of trade. But the question is not only the concept of trade. For example, in the case of why the consequences of these spices. This is the highest concentration of fault around the world by square kilometer. Castilla is one of the region of Spain. The name of Castilla is because it's a lot of castles, a lot of Castillos. But today, Moluccas Island have the highest concentration of castles around the world. I think this is the question important is to see what has been the impact. I am talking about Moluccas because I am not familiar with the part of the world, but I am quite familiar with Malucas, no? But think in the repercussion, in the impact of this idea of motorization, not only in the rate of spices or porcelain or silk or China. We need to think in the very worldwide and to see that what is the conclusion. It's not the same in Mexico, Spain, or Asia, or India. We need to see in the global wide what has been the conclusion of this kind of, let me say, adventure, human adventure that started with the willing to go further than the local place where the people are.
Thank you, Mr. Juan Carlos. Maybe Pak Armando would like to add some more.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Juan Carlos. I just would like to add something. Why did the Manila Galleon stop? Well, because the world situation changed. What kept the Manila Galleon working was a strong and big Spanish empire. Spain, of course, many parts of the Flanders in North Europe, some parts of the Mediterranean, practically the whole American continent except Brazil and the Philippines, and for some time also the Maluku Islands were part of the Spanish Empire. In the case of Maluku, I said only for some time because Maluku was a land of a very strong dispute between Portuguese, Dutch, and Spanish people. So Spain dominated the Maluku for a short period of time, but Mexico and the Philippines for a long period. What happened in 1815? 1815 was the last time the Manila Galleon traveled to the Americas. What happened? What happened then? Well, the collapse of the Spanish Empire and the independence of the American nation. Not only Mexico, from Mexico to Argentina, all countries at the beginning of the 19th century were having a war for independence, for their own independence. Why? Well, because Spain itself was fighting for independence. Spain had been invaded by Napoleon at that time. Spain had been invaded by Napoleon, and the American colonies took this opportunity to declare independence and start fighting for independence. Eventually, they achieved the independence, and Mexico became an independent country. Mexico tried to continue this route, tried to reinitiate this route, but the country was very, very weak at that time, very divided, very weak, and very poor. We had no money for initiating this process, and of course, we could not send this merchandise to Europe again. So what changed was the geopolitical situation, and in particular, the collapse of the Spanish Empire.
Yes, I would like also to add that 1815 was the Galleon issue that the ambassador said. But something interesting is because it was the collapse of this trade road, Spain was trying to establish a new road, following, I can see, the Portuguese from Filipinas to all the Indian Ocean, South Africa, and going to Spain through the Atlantic. It was some years it was working like this, but commercially it was not interested. It was very expensive, and the profit was very low. Also, I need to say that it was the idea to develop a new galleon from Manila to El Callao, Peru. But it was working for a few years, but of course, more important was Mexico. And I have a question, Ambassador. For me, one of the most impressive is everything arrived in the Pacific port of Mexico. That was transport to the Atlantic ports. Yes, by now. Then we go to Sevilla. Could you say something about this? Because I think this is fantastic. Tons cost of nationalized going high forces, these kind of things going from the Pacific to the
Well, it was really a promise to do that. It's not a short distance between the port of Acapulco to the port of Veracruz, and there are two mountainous chains, the Sierra Madre Occidental and the Sierra Madre Oriental. So the merchandise used to go by mules basically, crossing the continent, and some of the products were commercialized in Mexico City. I already mentioned that a market was something called El Parian, just like the market in the Philippines. Not only in Mexico City. Today, when some people in any part of Mexico say, I'm going to the Parian, they want to say, I'm going to the market. And that is a Filipino word that came to the Manila Galleon. And then they went to Puebla, another city on their way to Veracruz, where the Talavera Poblana, this porcelain, Mexican made porcelain with Asian influence was made, and finally to Veracruz to be sent to Seville and Cadiz. It was not easy to do that, but you have to remember that the Panama Canal did not exist at that time, and the other alternative was going all the way around the American continent, which is a very, very long way, or do as the Portuguese was doing, going around India and around Africa. The Portuguese were not really doing that, so the Spanish needed a different. So it was hard to do that, but they did it for the Portuguese. They accomplished it to do that.
Yeah. If I may add to what has been said about maybe why if it's so good, why did it stop? I agree with Pastor Mexico that the economic that the realities of the time really made it more expensive for Spain to have this galleon. First, Spain was already really, I think, having economic losses for the trade. Remember that during this time, I think the French Revolution, that was the time of the Enlightenment, and also maybe the ideas, some of them revolutionary at the time of the Galleon. Remember the American Revolution in 1776, and then followed by the French Revolution, really inspired people, colonies of Spain, to really aspire for independence. So it really led to the weakening of Spanish colonies in this part of including the Philippines. In fact, our national hero was inspired actually by the American Revolution and the French Revolution, the writings of the Enlightenment, the writings of Voltaire, all of these philosophers who really thought about the questioning what is that doctrine of monarchy or something. Yeah. So that is the reason it led to the time the Spanish Empire was really at its weakest. So I think it was expected for them to continue this enterprise. And we also remember that during this time, the Industrial Revolution in the Americas was also. So there are also other competing economic powers at that time.
Okay, thank you. So it's a really global political and economic and social changes that drive the road is no longer continued yet. So I hope that answered the questions, but if you still have more questions later on, we can discuss after the event. Next questions, please. I saw the ladies before here. Committee, please. Tim Panitia, boleh dibantu, Mas. Terima kasih.
So, first of all, I would like to thank the
for the presentation. It was lovely. And actually, I just want to ask a technical question about the Galleon. So before the Galleon was invented, the Spaniards were famous for sailing using caraca, which averagely could carry around 500 tons of goods. So I was wondering, while Manila Galleon is said to be the largest galleon, how much goods could it carry, and how were they stacked? And did it affect the fact that it was also a warship? Thank you.
Okay, who will answer first? Yeah.
Yes, well, the road of followed by the Galleon was several months. And you know that it was every year in the same period, taking into account the winds of the monsoon. It started in America in June and come back by December. Of course, it was a lot of things very rich inside of the Galleon. And the pirates knows everything. The question is, the Galleon was now, this is the name of the boat now, specifically for trade. But in order to avoid the attacks of the pirates, maybe it was British and from Netherlands, but also for local people, the people traveling in the area of Filipinas, Marianas, and Carolinas. The question was with the capacity to defend itself, but also at the beginning, it was also accompanied by several boats in order to protect the galleon. Think that in 250 years, according to the weather, it was some shipwrecks, but only 5 galleons was sized by them. Only 5. Of course, the money side. And this is the reason because the defense of the galleon was something very, very important. And the galleon was leaving Manila and then going to, and one fleet was for boat, war. The fleet was waiting the galleon in order to protect the galleon when it started the trip through Japan and also to arrive to Mexico. I think the question of security and defense was a priority in terms of to maintain and to keep values, but it was not a lot of money inside. As well from the outside, because practically the galleon coming from Mexico, it was silver was the most important trade from Mexico to Filipinas. Why? Because the traders, the Chinese, didn't accept gold, they accept only silver. And this is the ambassador of Mexico was showing a very interesting picture, one of $8 with the stamp of the Chinese. I don't know if you see the stamp, Chinese stamp, in order to say this silver is a good one. I hope this is okay for the answer. It's okay? Thank you.
Ambassador Roman, would you like to add the capacity and the funds? All the
I'm very confident. In this regard, and not always the expert.
Actually, also very curious, the capacity.
I wanted to say something present. When I was I spent 5 years like ambassador in Timor. And one day I was in the very remote beach, and it was the lady, selling some fruits, some vegetables, small things, but it was in coins. Wow, it's coin. This is the real, the 8, silver. How is coin, silver coin, with the stamp? Right here. Very easy. Because the Chinese let the money silver. they went to Timor to buy white sandal. And they paid with this coin of the auction that it was like $1 today. Oh, much more than $1 today. And it was amazing to find silver from Mexico, the Chinese stamp in the small markets. Selling this stock. For me, it was something amazing, and it was discovering to see this kind of silver coins in the small market in the middle of nowhere in East Timor.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any more question? I see the two. Okay. Okay. Mas yang baju merah dulu, baru kita Mas yang di depan. Monggo Mas.
Okay. Good afternoon, speakers, distinguished speakers. What passive presentations from the distinguished speakers this afternoon. One of the questions is, I would like to bring this topic into today's era. Like today, countries perceive spices, porcelain, textiles, and other stuff as the main commodities to trade. Like today's main commodities are like oils, gas, and minerals, and maybe other technology supporting materials to produce computers like semiconductor chip and nickel. Now, and then my question is, is there any chance to revive these spice wood into kind of technological wood or something like that? Because I think this road is kind of majestic at the time, kind of as a great trade route at the time, and I think that this spice route can be revived by change the commodities. Like in Maluku, in Moluccas, it produced kind of nickel to the production of the electric vehicle. You know that electric vehicle is the promising and most interesting commodities today. So the question is actually just, is there any chance to revive this spice food into the nowadays commodity, like I've mentioned before? Thank you.
Oke, dari Mas Anton mungkin ya Mas ya. Tapi ini nyambungnya sebenarnya ke jalur komersil dunia saat ini ya, yeah. Mungkin different jalurnya ya.
Okay. So although the age of trade during the medieval era has ended, but the route itself never died. The spice route and the Manila Acapulco Galleon route, I think it's very much alive today because we still use them for exporting and importing stuff that, like you said, maybe not always spice or silk or porcelain, but other commodities as well. Because maybe we are not using galleon anymore, but we know about the tanker, for example, the large ship that contains many what is it, peti kemas? Yeah, peti kemas. So the large ship container, this large ship, yeah, the cargo ship brings commodity like electronics, porcelain also, silk, and then spices is also still very much alive today. So I think the route itself is never dead. It's still very much alive today.
Okay. Anyone want to try?
Bringing to current times the subject of world trade, I would like to say that we can observe today two different and somehow opposite phenomena. One of them is the globalization, and the other is the regionalization, and they coexist. They exist simultaneously. What do I mean with regionalization? I mean that some countries are associating among themselves with other countries from their own region to produce better, to compete better in the international market. And regarding the people sitting in this panel, well, we belong to 3 different regions. The Asia Pacific region or Indo-Pacific region, Indonesia and the Philippines, the European region, which is Spain, and the North American region. The 3 largest trading blocks in the world are precisely those. The one centered in Asia Pacific, which is re-centered in ASEAN, because there is not any organization of Asian nations. And in the absence of such organization, ASEAN has become de facto the center of this process. ASEAN is the place where the RCEP, which eventually will become the most important trading bloc in the world, has been negotiated in the frame of ASEAN, and Indonesia happens to be today commanding ASEAN precisely. The second trading bloc is the European Union. Spain is part of the European Union. And the third largest trading bloc is the North American market, with Canada, the US, and Mexico as part of them. Practically, they have the GDP of these 3 blocks is practically the same, and the 3 blocks together have more than 80% of the world output. So we are, I insist, we are witnessing 2 different processes: a process of globalization and a process of regionalization.
Thank you. Very quickly, I think as you have been saying, the Manila Galleon is a precursor of globalization. We have to consider the many developments since then. We have the developments of the Industrial Revolution, where products were mass produced, mass production, improvements in transportation. So there is the globalization created like a global factory. There is no one product now that is produced by one country, meaning we cannot, all the products that you see are produced in many countries. So that's the product of mass production, also the just in time. So meaning, rather than exporting a whole product from, as was before, from Philippines to Mexico, along the production line, the factory, the producer can outsource the raw materials, assemble it in another place, and sell it in another place. So that's really the big change in the production system compared to the production system at the time of the 18th century. So this is something like globalization. At the time, all the products traded are really commodities, but right now, most of the products are produced, manufactured, value added. So meaning they are completed along the production line until it reaches the market. So this is really, it shows we have a global supply chain or a regional supply chain. So in theory, this is similar to the Manila Galleon trade, except that goods are physically transported as a whole, but this time goods are produced in bits and pieces until it arrives to its destination.
Thank you, Her Excellency. It will be very interesting ideas also to talk about modern trade route later on. But very complete explanations. We will have other questions. Oh, Mas, ya. Tunggu ya, Mas. Okay.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity that you have given to me. My name is Yoga, and I want to ask 2 questions in one opportunity. Is it possible, Madam Moderator?
Yes, but very quickly.
Okay. First, since this seminar contained the word of Manila, which is capital city of Philippines, I wonder the role of Philippines at that time. Is it the spices producer or just the important transit port before the spices was exported to Spain? That is the first question. And the second question, I want to enrich my knowledge about this topic. And this question, I want to ask to His Excellency Armando and Mr. Zuan. As I learned in elementary to senior high school that based on Zaragoza Treaty or Tordesillas Treaty that was made by the Pope and the Spain and the Portuguese Kingdom, the exploration of area in both countries was decided that Molucca was under Portuguese authority, and the Spanish had the right of Philippines. So interesting for me that we talk about the Molucca from beginning and to end of the seminar. So I want to ask about, since even that exploration area that was decided in Zaragoza Treaty, is it that Spanish still has the right to exploit the spices from the Molucca or not? Or is there any agreement between the two countries beyond the treaty? Thank you.
Okay, so I will give the first opportunity to the Excellency.
Yes, let me answer the question particularly to the Philippines. As we say, Molucca is the center spices, but for the Manila Galleon trade, I think the role of the Philippines is we also produce the gold. We are a major gold producer. We also produce which is also used in the Galleon. We produce the ropes used in the ship because as you see, we have the Manila hemp, the abaca. That's product. You need ropes, you know, when you do the ships. We produce the logs, the wood. It comes from the Philippines, and of course, we also produce the sailors to man the galleon. So I'm not very sure about the spices we produce, but we really produce the major agricultural products at the time and the materials used in the building of the Manila Galleon.
So actually, there's a complete explanations about the positions of Manila, and we will share the paper later on, so you can read more about this. Welcome to Pak Juan Kawasan.
Okay, well, the question of right to explode, no, is according with the more powerful. In fact, you know, the line of Tordesillas, it was the line to define 360 miles to the west of Cabo Verde, the islands of Cabo Verde in Africa, to say, okay, to the west is for this Spain, to the east is for Portugal. But at this time, it was impossible with the knowledge to know what is the anti-meridian, what is the line in the other side of the world. It was impossible. And it was a dispute about Moluccas. Why Moluccas? Because Moluccas were producing cloth and nugget. By this time, the price of nuggets, it was more expensive than the price of the weight of gold. 1 kilo of nugget, it was more expensive than 1 kilo of gold in Europe. It was a dispute. Portugal said, no, this is in my jurisdiction. Spain did, no, this is in my jurisdiction. And it was a joint venture, if you want, of geographers from Spain and Portugal in order to define what was the anti-meridiano, the line crossing. In fact, today, new technology is clear that it was in the jurisdiction of Portugal. But Spain said, oh, this is mine. And Portugal, well, you have we lost Malacca. We don't have capacity, military capacity to impose. And what say Spain? Okay, I can sell to you your rights by 300,000 ducados de oro, gold ducados. In fact, Spain was selling to the Portugal the jurisdiction that it was of Portugal. This is the question. But the question is, going to precise to your question, the right to explode and to say, to have a monopoly of spices, this is a question of power, military power. The Vogue, the company of India, it was like a private company. It was able to have soldiers, warships, and to use the force in order to maintain the monopoly of the spices. Not only Moluccas, but also Java for the pepper, but nutmeg and clove. Conclusion: the more strong was the right to exploit the natural resources.
Okay. His Excellency.
Well, just a very, very brief comment. That is precisely the reason why we did not invite the lady ambassador from Portugal. We didn't want to have a dispute in this room.
Okay. Okay. Now we have the questions answered. Ilmas sudah menjawab cukup ya. Okay. The question from this area, please, Mas yang berhitam. Teman-teman panitia, kalau ada pertanyaan dari online diinfokannya. Thank you. Okay.
Hello, thank you so much for this event. I have a question, and as the route departed from Manila to Acapulco, and then it was transferred from Acapulco to Veracruz in Mexico, and then to Europe. How the empire managed to connect this route with the rest of the empire in America, like Peru or Argentina and the rest of the territories in America? And I have a second question. Wouldn't it have more sense to make the route to Panama because of the strait? Despite not having a channel, but the chunk of land would be smaller and maybe cheaper, the route in total. Thank you.
Okay, maybe
This is another question that corresponds to Spain, because they were the head of the empire was in Europe, not in America. But anyway, yes, indeed, as colleague says, the Mexico was the center of this trade between Asia and Europe, but there was some time when the ships diverted to other parts of the continent, specifically to Panama and to Lima. The two most important viceroyalties in the American continent for Spain was the viceroyalty of the New Spain, Mexico, and the viceroyalty of Peru. And that is how many Asian culture came to Peru also. They have an important Asian culture. Ceviche, they have also the ceviche, which was inspired in this Asian technique, and they have a lot of Asian influences. The traifa, they call traifa the Peruvian food, is a Peruvian food with a very strong Chinese or Japanese influence. However, later on, the rules of the empire became more strict, and they did not allow to trade intra-provinces. All the trade needed to be between each province and Spain, and not between provinces, to prevent the emergence of nationalisms in the possessions in the colonies.
So one would like to add some more insight.
The fact is that everything arriving to Mexico, to I would say new the new countries in South America. For example, it was some of the products arriving to Mexico analyzed in Lima, in Peru, because it was also navigation, coastal navigation from Mexico by the Pacific, going to Ecuador and going to until Lima, until Peru, because Peru was very important also in terms of virreinato in the South America. And also from Lima, it was a road going to Buenos Aires, not by the sea, but by land. I think the distribution not only was to Spain, was sent to Spain, but also was reaching the countries in all South America, mainly, I say, in Peru and Argentina.
Okay. I hope that answered questions, or later we can have discussions with the speakers here. Okay, any more questions from the floor? Go ahead. Record. Oh. Yeah.
Semoga dari kedutaan, mungkin dari kedutaan Spanyol atau kedutaan Meksiko bisa mempersembahkan kapal Galleon yang pernah percaya.
There's a special request actually from our having. If there is a possibility from the Mexican Embassy, Philippine Embassy, and Spain Embassy, obviously, to provide like a miniatures of the Galleon Manila to be exhibited in Museum Bahari, because we will have a room dedicated miniature of the galleons, miniatures of the galleons, because we will have a new room for 6 all for the room. So maybe this is one of the things that can be discussed more when we had a museum programs. Okay, thank you Ibu. Okay, I see tadi ada yang mau bertanya di sini. Siapa? Masnya ya? Oke. Rekan panitia masih ada berapa menit lagi, Mbak? Oke, silakan Mas.
Baik, sebelumnya perkenalkan saya dari Laskar Indonesia. Saya pernah berlayar untuk menelusuri titik-titik jalur rempah yang ada di Indonesia, di Antartika itu ke Sulawesi Selatan, Makassar, Tuba, kemudian Bogor, kemudian terakhir di Ternate. Namun saya mengunjungi museum maupun tempat kerja, itu saya tidak pernah mendengar itu adanya Manila Galleon beserta rutenya. Apakah kontribusi Indonesia terhadap Manila Galleon dan rutenya ini itu sedikit sehingga publikasi terhadap Manila Galleon dan rutenya ini tidak masuk dalam jalur rempah gitu. Saya cuma ingin menanyakan itu bagaimana, apakah kontribusi Indonesia itu sedikit sehingga publikasinya tidak begitu banyak yang ada di Indonesia gitu informasinya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Okay, so the question is, like, we are not familiar, most of Indonesia not familiar with the Manila Galleon spice route. So his question is, he is part of the Spices Troops. It's actually a program initiated by the Indonesian government to understand more about the spices in Indonesia. And his question is it because, maybe Mas Anton, yeah? Is it because Indonesia's contribution at the time probably is not really big? That's why the Manila Galleon is not as famous in Indonesia historical perspective, or is there any insight? No.
Maybe I'll answer it in Indonesian. That's okay. Jadi memang kontribusi secara langsung antara jalur rempah atau Kepulauan Nusantara dengan rute Manila Acapulco Galleon route itu tidak ada secara langsung, tapi yang perlu kita ingat adalah pada satu ketika di abad 15 sampai 16 itu di Maluku itu ada dua kerajaan besar yang masing-masing itu bermitra dengan dua kerajaan besar di Eropa. Kalau saya tidak salah, Ternate dengan Portugal dan Tidore dengan Spanyol. Nah, mungkin sebenarnya koneksinya ada di sini, Mas. Jadi bahwa Spanyol itu kemudian seperti yang tadi disampaikan oleh duta besar, bahwa untuk menghalangi VOC mengambil alih Manila, Spanyol itu sedikit mengalah, gitu. Dia lepas Maluku. Jadi kontribusinya sebenarnya di sana, kalau menurut kami. Jadi selain bahwa ada pergerakan barang, dalam hal ini mungkin cengkeh dan pala dari Maluku ke Manila, juga pada akhirnya Spanyol untuk meredam ambisi dari VOC ini sedikit melepas Maluku, kemudian berkonsentrasi ke Manila. Mungkin itu dalam hemat kami. Jadi makanya dalam sejarah bangsa kita ini, rute Manila Acapulco Galleon ini sedikit asing begitu. Tapi bahkan bagi saya pun yang diberi tanggung jawab untuk mengawal jalur rempah menjadi warisan dunia ini juga awalnya baru mendengar itu di tahun 2021 ketika South China Morning Post itu membuat suatu artikel dalam bentuk animasi mengenai perjalanan dari Manila sampai Acapulco begitu. Nah, namun kemarin beberapa hari lalu saya cek lagi, ternyata artikelnya itu sudah hilang linknya, gitu. Sayang sekali, tapi setidaknya bisa memberikan gambaran kepada kita betapa beratnya perjalanan yang perlu ditempuh oleh para pelaut-pelaut Filipina maupun Spanyol untuk menembus Pasifik sampai ke Acapulco. Gitu.
Terima kasih, Mas Anton. So, I would like to ask an opinion from Mr. Juan Carlos. What do you think, like the importance of the contributions of Molucca or spices in this Manila Galleon? Because I saw that you have a book there. It tells a story about forts actually, right? In Ternate, or sorry, in Tidore, in Moluccas Island. So, can you please give your perspective?
Well, I think it's clear. Well, I think it's an opportunity to do some publicity, if I can. About one book has been translated to Indonesian and has been edited by the Spanish Embassy, the Spanish Corporation, as well from Minister of Tourism. What is inside of this book? This book, this is a description of, let me say, what we can see today, because other forts have been destroyed, absolutely, but we can see today as a consequence of the importance trade of spices in Malucas Island. I think this is the content of Tidore as well. In Ternate, of course, we have also in Sulawesi, we have also in Banda, in Jalur, many places, but it has been concentrating the more important thing. I think for me, this is a page. I was talking. This is a page of the history, common history between Indonesia, Spain, Portugal, and also Netherlands. This is a common heritage that the Indonesian people need to be aware of the importance of this heritage. I think that's the question to say one is good and the other is not so good and the other is bad. It's not the question of this. It's a question to share a common experience, a common heritage that this is tangible. Today we can touch Tojula, Santiago de los Caballeros, Spanish, Isoasio, or Castela in Ternate. This book is work of near 2 years of investigation in several museums in Spain, mainly in Netherlands, and with picture, a lot of from drone area view, and I think this is as we say, part of one of the writers of the book has been a very good thing to write the importance of that. And as well, this is promote the tourism, historical tourism valley. Everyone knows valley. No, we have another places in Indonesia so important, much more important that beach, for example, we have castles, we have historic, we have everything in few islands in now I would like to say that tomorrow we are going to Ternate to present the book and commentary about and then I am going to now Siao. Why? Because the Spanish castle, Santa Rosa, that it was the last president of Spain in the territory of Indonesia. I am going to Siao to check if something happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nanti teman-teman yang berminat bisa main-main ke perpustakaannya Museum Bahari Tanah Air Kopi. Tadi kita dikasih oleh Wan Kapas. But later on, we can also check the book, and if you're very interested, you can also come to Museum Bahari Jakarta. Okay, last questions before we wrap up. Oh, comment. Okay, please.
About the importance of the Moluccas or Spice Island. I think were it not for the search for the Spice Island, the Philippines would not have been discovered. Actually, yes, before the Spanish arrived, the Philippines was a thriving hub of commerce. We have been during a pre-Hispanic history. The Philippines has been trading with the Arabs, trading with the Chinese. We have been really, in fact, we're trading with the Dutch. So we have been traders, and I think we have much trading with the Arab traders at the time. And they say that if the Spain would not have arrived earlier, would have been more Islamic country. But I think it's history. But I may say that that history, our history with the Moluccas or Indonesia, is really linked because of that. That event in history that we were discovered by explorers, first with Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, then followed up by Ferdinand Magellan, the Portuguese. But actually, even before our pre-colonial history, they say that we were part of the Majapahit Empire. But that will be another seminar. So that was our pre-colonial history. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency. Okay, let's give big applause for amazing speakers for today. Okay, actually, if you want to know more about Manila Galleon food and specials, is there any book that each speaker can recommend to the audience? Mr. Maybe, is there any book that you would like to recommend?
Colleague of mine from the Foreign Service, he is retired from the Foreign Service. Actually, he did something similar to what Ambassador Juan Carlos Rey did. He retired to the Foreign Service, and Cuauhtémoc Villamar, he was posted in different Asian countries. The last one was Singapore. And he became a scholar in Singapore, and he has been publishing about the Manila Galleon. At this very moment, I don't have the title or how to obtain this book. But I can send the information to the Bahari Museum, and maybe if you are going to put something in your homepage about the event, you can put also some bibliography on the Manila Galleon. I will give you this title because finally it is a Mexican vision of the Manila Galleon. We have different visions: the Indonesian vision, the Filipino vision, the Spain vision, and this one, what I'm talking about, is the one from former colleague of the Foreign Service, Cuauhtemoc Villamar, who wrote a book on the Manila Galleon. I will give you the title of the book and how to obtain it.
Thank you. From
Yes, I cannot now tell exactly which books, but we have a lot of literature on the Manila Acapulco because last year we in 2021 we celebrated the 500 years anniversary of the Christianity arrival of Christianity in the Philippines, or of course the arrival of Spain 1521. So we celebrated 500 years, and there were a lot of writings made literature on the occasion, and that includes Manila Acapulco Galleon. Of course, as I said, there is a Manila Galleon exhibition in Manila in our National Museum. There is really a lot of things there that was part of the Manila Galleon. I think it was a painstaking work of our historians, of our cultural institutions to reconstruct how a Manila Galleon looks like, what is inside. So I would invite you to visit Manila, the National Museum. And of course, I will gladly provide a miniature of that for the museum, because I think we have a lot of this, what do you call that? Commemoration of that Manila Galleon.
Thank you, Her Excellency.
Well, I think I would like to do a recommendation from speaking. Now that will be tomorrow will be night. I think 5 times was too much. And not only because it's beautiful, the landscape, the scuba diving, but please take your holidays, prepare your holidays, your free time, and discover this place. Believe me, you will be amazed about this landscape, volcanoes, history, and also something important for the people that we like also under the biological point of view is the line of Wallace. And of Wallace, that is, I would say, the line that separates the marsupials, fauna of Australia, with Taphentarius, the fauna from Europe, Asia. This is a line, the border between 2 parts of the animals in this area. It's very rich. Take your time, enjoy your holidays, enjoy your moments. According to the book.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for recommendation from the Ministry of Culture. Is there any specific book? I know that you have a rich website, Jalur.
Yeah. So about the spice route, maybe you can visit the Jalur and regarding about the book on spice route, I will recommend you to read the Antonelli's book, volume 1, The Land Below the Winds, and then I forgot the author, but Out of the East. That's a very good book, and I used the book for my presentation today. And also a book that was published by Yayasan Negeri Rempah and called Negeri Bawah Angin, or The Land Beneath the Wind. And maybe I can recommend you the 3 books to know more about the spice book. Thank you.
Terima kasih Mas Anton. Dan kalau teman-teman tertarik melihat bagaimana Jakarta berperan dalam konstelasi Jalur Rempah, Indonesia Hidden Heritage Creative sendiri kita mempublish sebuah buku berjudul Gudang-Gudang Tua di Jakarta, dan itu secara spesifik membahas bagaimana Jakarta berperan dalam perdagangan rempah-rempah di masa itu. Okay, again, we would like to say thank you for all the ambassadors, former ambassadors of the EU and from the Ministry of Culture and Education for sharing the explicit knowledge about the Manila Galleon sponsor. Please give a big applause again, once again. And we have a merchandise from the Ministry of Culture. There are 3 special books that will be given by Ibu Ari. We would like to invite Ibu Ari. Yeah. Boleh, please have a stand first, and I will return this to our excellent MC. Thank you once again. It's
And again, a round of applause for our speakers. Amazing. It's very insightful and very explicit knowledge. So, yeah. Acara selanjutnya adalah pembelian souvenir berupa buku dari Direktorat Pengembangan dan Pemanfaatan Kebudayaan Kemdikbudristek dan juga buku dari Museum Bahari sebagai Remembrance of the Glory of Paris. Baik, dan mohon izin untuk hadirin yang berbahagia, inilah speaker dan juga narasumber. Mohon izin bisa merapat, ya. Ayo, silakan untuk dapat bergabung. Sekali lagi, terima kasih kepada para speaker dan juga kepada Direktorat Pengembangan dan Pemanfaatan Kebudayaan Kemdikbudristek dan juga Museum Bahari yang telah memberikan kenang-kenangan sebagai pengingat kita terhadap Manila Galleon and the Spice Route today. Dan sebelum acara berakhir, inilah pemutaran video dari Wigo.
Tourism, a beating heart of a country where they can show the world
Kami mohonkan untuk para hadirin untuk
their culture, uniqueness, and history.
Acara belum berakhir. Baik, sekali lagi untuk yang terhormat para hadirin untuk dapat duduk kembali karena acara belum berakhir dan masih akan ada penandatanganan bersama Wigo sebagai bentuk dari digitalisasi museum.
Tourism, a beating heart of a country where they can show the world their culture, uniqueness, and history from the prehistory.
Tourism, a beating heart of the country where they can show the world their culture, uniqueness, and history from the prehistory of Egypt, the beauty of Iraq, and the mystery of Asia. There are tons of things to do and places to visit. Now, from a country in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Wigo is here to bring the world of tourism together. Here we go.
Wigo Indonesia, Diberlakukan Wigo Indonesia. Dan kami mengundang kepada Bapak Ruki Adi Kuna selaku Direktur Bisnis dari Wigo Indonesia, PT Jelajah Wisata Digital, dan juga Mbak Nova, Farida Besarwazir selaku Direktur Eksekutif dari Indonesia Heritage Creative Hub untuk naik ke atas panggung dikarenakan adanya penandatanganan perjanjian untuk digitalisasi museum.
We would like to invite Ms. Arian Payung as the representative of the museum. This is a very wonderful moment where we would like to sign a cooperation to museum with Wigo Indonesia.
Dan kami turut mengundang untuk sesi dokumentasi dapat maju ke depan panggung untuk lebih dekat mengabadikan momen bersejarah ini. Baik. Tepuk tangan yang meriah untuk Wigo Indonesia dan Museum di DKI Jakarta. Baik, untuk dapat didokumentasikan untuk penandatanganan perjanjian bersama Wigo Indonesia. Baik, terima kasih dan kami undang kembali untuk dapat duduk kembali. Lagi kami ucapkan. Sekali lagi kami ucapkan terima kasih kepada institusi dan media partner yang telah secara penuh dan antusias mendukung berlangsungnya seminar di siang hari ini. Para peserta seminar Manila Galleon Spice Road yang terhormat, waktu sudah sampai di penghujung hari dan kami mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta dan juga narasumber yang telah hadir. Thank you so much for the very insightful and for this Manila Galleon Spice Road. Dan kepada para peserta, narasumber dan para undangan, kami mempersilahkan untuk dapat menuju ke bar cafe untuk dapat mencicipi makanan, minuman ringan dari keempat negara yang berpartisipasi di seminar ini. Kami juga persilahkan untuk dapat berkunjung ke snack bazar baik yang terletak di dalam maupun di luar ruangan dan dapat menikmati band atau musik yang dipersembahkan oleh Dakdikduk Band dari Suku Dinas Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Jakarta Utara. Sebelumnya, because in Jakarta and Riau, it is very good to say pantun or a poem in English. I will want to. Is it able? Baik. Jalan-jalan di Jakarta. In Jakarta, you can find fruit. Tanpa banyak berkata. Together we learn and deepen the bond with the history of Spice Road. Saya dari Rempah-Manila kita mencoba Jakarta dan Putri Indonesia Kepulauan Riau favorit undur diri dan sampai jumpa di seminar selanjutnya. Salam museum, museum di hatiku.
Good.
Akhiri.